Hey, it's Juan at PSL again. I just finished my physical therapy appointment. So if I sound a little winded, that's normal, I guess, from my shoulder surgery. But part 2 of Northern officers wanting to come down and work in Florida. I told you on part 1, great place to work. Good conditions, but there are some areas that are wild and busy, but there's also some jurisdictions that you're more there for guidance and emergency situations and vehicles and health situations, which is cool too. I mean, after you worked in an area up north where you were in the same sector going to the, I don't know how many calls the sector get, but I'm gonna guess around 30 a night. Sometimes the same call, 3 hours separated from each other because they went back at it after you left. They promised to cut it out or they promised to leave, and you know how that goes. They come back, they can't resist each other, and then of course, the part 2 of the fighting, or part 5, whatever it is, of the fighting starts all over again. So you have to go back to the same call and separate the same people. Anyway, you guys know about that. Down here, there's some areas, there is some Section 8 housing, there's certain places, I think, where they have lower income people working. But for the most part, since I wasn't on patrol all the time, I only had to patrol once in a while as a reserve. I'm not an expert. I'm not going to try to give you an expert's view on that. I am going to tell you I did work in the schools, and I did sometimes see who showed up as the parents, and then you can understand why the kid is acting that way, or why the kid has issues or whatever, because the parents are very big into my kid didn't do that, or you're accusing the wrong kid or whatever. And then you have to kindly remind them that we have videos in our schools, in our buildings, in our stairs, in our buses. There's a lot of video coverage on our streets. I think the buses now, after I retired, they might have 6 or 8 cameras. When I was there, 4 cameras was a lot. We got to see, who threw the first punch, who grabbed the knapsack, who stole the apple, whatever the claim was. You can see a lot on these cameras. And then part 2 is when the parent shows up and says his baby didn't do nothing. No, you got the wrong kid. I've had everything from, a pencil being put in somebody's face and plunge, out of playfulness. I know that's not the term, but I think that's the term I heard, so I'm just repeating it to you so you can see the feeling you get. I got the same feeling, with playfulness, with a pencil in the face of another kid, not related, not even if it were related, not good, but so when I first started, I think it's around 2006, you did respond. There was only 6 of us, and I'm giving you a little brief insight into working in Florida. Your jurisdiction that you choose obviously could be different clientele, different demographics, different altitudes in the climate and weather. But there was bus fights you responded to. The bus driver would be screaming on the radio, they're fighting, and then you got there. In my case, I tried to get there quick, but I was covering 21 schools in south part of the county, so I could be anywhere responding. I did try to respond a lot of times, but when I did, the fight was over. Very few fights I had to actually break up. Now on the school campuses, I broke more fights, hands-on. But on the buses, usually when they heard the bus driver, call for security, call for police, we did both. What our response was, see if there's a local sector car that can respond there while I'm responding there if I'm available. I also could be tied up on other jobs that came, but in a perfect world, you're responding to a bus fight, you're responding to a car accident, and car accidents was something major because you had to identify each child still on the bus, whether they were injured or not. 99% of the time, if I can remember correctly, they were not injured. They were just shaken. Obviously, the traumatizing effect. And you identify everybody. You ask the bus driver, did they drop anybody off, so you can take them off the master roster when you compare it to who was there and who should have been there, or who didn't go to school today. The bus driver, after a while, they learn their kids very well. In the beginning, it's potluck, because new routes for them and new schools and new kids, but they're a good help. The area managers would come and assist in the transportation side of things. I would assist in the law enforcement part of things. My job was I documented the scene. I took pictures, airbag release, how much body damage to the car, how much damage to the driver and passengers. All that stuff was in my little essay, and then I would send that essay to like 10 people. So because 10 different department heads and principals and assistant principals and maybe even deans, they want to know their kids were affected. How are they affected? Are they going to have to make parent contact? Was I able to see parents at the scene? Because a lot of times you get there, the kids are on the cell phone and the parents are there, demanding it, and access to the bus. So we had to be careful with that. Go inside, they're not injured. Have the kid relayed to the parents they're not injured. If the parent insists they want to take their kid home after such a dramatic event, then of course, they took them home. You had to make note to the school that, certain kids are not coming in today due to the dramatic event that happened. Like I said, most of the time, some bus got hit by a car. Once in a blue moon, the bus actually hit the car, but most of the times, people hit the bus. The driving, they drove into a bus, either on the side or the back, whatever. Like I said, my job was to document the scene. I took about 10 to 15 photos. A lot of times, if there was a street sign nearby, I took a picture of the street sign to make sure everybody has a spelling, because sometimes when you call out a name of a street, and we all have these accents, I was told, they might not understand which street we're calling out, whether we're at, because other people might be responding. Local law enforcement might want to come and take a peek, whether if they need it or not. Sometimes they're needed to direct traffic and block off the street and deal with the angry driver that whatever allegation they're making, they're trying to blame somebody for the bus accident, whatever. All normal things if you work up north. I'm just saying, in my job down here, I loved it. It was busy. At the end of the day, you were busy. They have a lot of sports activities down here, not counting dances and other stuff similar to that the school may have. Sometimes they have grand openings or welcome back to school events, stuff like that. And also, so that things like that kept you busy. I had 21 schools, so obviously I'm only going to be able to do one thing out of that list. Sometimes the principals were okay. They understood my workload, and sometimes, They were more insistent. So, I worked with them. It was my job to work with them, and I did. I enjoyed it. I don't think off the top of my head that I had a difficult principal. Except when you mentioned Donald Trump, then things could get testy. But other than that, great relationship, great working. They understood my function. They understood I was law enforcement. They understood I worked for the school board. They understood I worked for the sheriff's department. They understood I knew my job. I had 20 years of prior law enforcement experience. So I did have to learn how to be a school security officer, working for the school board as opposed to a campus security. Down here, campus security doesn't have to be law enforcement. A lot of them are retired law enforcement. They just don't want to join an agency because now you owe an agency. When you join them, you owe them. You have to do their training, and then you have to do their free patrol. That's one of the reasons they sponsor you, is because they're going to get some future free patrol out of you, a lot. So anyway, I did a lot of county fairs for the sheriff's office. I did parades. I did, festivals, and, I did a lot of things where it didn't tie up a full-time deputy. They added deputies, and with us, it increased the manpower. If you have 4, 5, 6 reserves there, and you have 3 or 4 deputies, now you got a gang of 10. So it shows good coverage, good management. I have nothing against it. Some of the events I did enjoy. I would have never gone to a fair in my life if it wasn't because I had to work there. So I got to see Bengal tigers, and I got to see racing pigs and things as a northerner working in New York City, I'm not aware of. I mean, I'm sure I've seen it on TVs, or I'm sure I've seen videos of it, but seeing it live, you're standing there, watching people enjoy it. You kind of get the hang of it. Hey, this is okay. It's not. And then seeing the Bengal tigers is always going to be okay, because that's, other than going to the zoo, a handful of times in New York, because I was always working, but I did go a handful of times, and seeing them at the fair was a much closer and bigger deal. And I'm an older person too, so I did appreciate it, as opposed to being a younger person, working several jobs and worried about getting rest, and worried about getting to gym, and worried about being at all my details or jobs on time, and and all that comes with that. Uniforms, suit. I worked a job where I had to wear a suit, so all that goes with it. Anyway, working in Florida, this is video part 2. I liked it. Jurisdictions have different salaries. I recommend you reach out to somebody. Hopefully somebody in the jurisdiction you're going to come and work for or live in. That gives you better access. I didn't have that, so I'm giving you a northerner's view without knowing a soul. It wasn't until I moved here and was in Walmart where I heard one person say, "Hey, Juan," and then the next week I heard another person say, "Hey, Juan," and I'll turn around and I actually knew the person, because Juan's not a rare name. It's quite common, so "Hey, Juan" is not always for you. But in my case, when people yelled it out in the store or whatever, in the mall, whatever I was, it was for me, and that was kind of cool, like, wow, you live down here too, and we have New York in common. We have now living in Port St. Lucie or the surrounding area in common, because there's a lot of great towns off of Port St. Lucie. The Stewart, Palm City, Fort Pierce. There's a lot of other towns that are near here or close to commute to here, depending on what lifestyle you want. Okeechobee, my impression is that it's more rural. You know, you want to live on a trailer, you want to live on a camper, you want to live on a farm or a ranch, or whatever the proper terminology is for a plot of land. You know, a big plot of land. You know, some people live with their parents, some people take over their parents' houses, some people just buy a big plot of land. You know, and yet you're a half hour, 40 minutes from urban society. You know, even though, you know, Okeechobee and Indian River County, you know, they also have their, you know, their main areas, their main shopping areas. But I'm just saying, if you wanted to work in a metropolitan area, you know, with 5G ultra wide, you know, Verizon and other companies are down here. They provide very good service. In 5G, a lot of the town is 5G ultra wide, which, from what I heard, is supposed to be the fastest and strongest internet. You know, once in a while it goes down to 4G, LTE or whatever. But you know, that's while they're working on things or adjusting things or whatever. But for the most part, you got 5G ultra wide, I find. Today, everything is your phone. You have GPS. You're going to a job. My case, the first couple of years, I actually bought GPS units. I had them in my dash. It was part of my equipment. And every, you know, bus accident, I had to type it in as I'm learning the town. There's a lot of circles down here. There might be in some of the jurisdictions you go to where the street is one name for a mile or two, and then it changes with the next intersection to another name, yet you're still going in a straight line. You know, you didn't make a left or a right. You're going straight, and it changes from one name to another. So, you know, that's one of the things. You'll get used to it. You're young. It's nothing. You got your cell phone. You know, you don't even need your GPS. I still have mine somewhere. I haven't even seen it in years, but I'm sure I still own them. I got at least 2 models. They, you know, had live updates and all that stuff, but your phone has everything in it. You know, carrying your phone, and then I had a work phone, so I was carrying 2 phones. You try to keep, you know, all your business associates, your work associates on your work phone that was provided by the job, and then you try to keep your personal life on the other phone. But you know, your choice. Some people made their work phone their personal phone for a couple of dollars a month extra that was withdrawn from their check, and it was well worth it, because you wouldn't get a plan that cheap from, you know, Sprint or T-Mobile or Verizon. So you know, that was a good idea too, if you don't mind, you know, having all your contacts, or having your work theoretically having access to your phone because it's their phone. I didn't have that issue. I think once I was accused of talking too much about it, and I showed them my personal phone, and then I showed them my personal bill. It says I pay $120 a month for 2 phones. So if you're going to accuse me of using your phone, you can see I use my phone. Now if some dean, SRO, deputy, PSL officer, whatever, 4PS officer calls me after hours and asking me about, you know, either school board policy or school board access to files. You know, we assisted a lot with their cases, you know, whatever they asked us, since we were sworn law enforcement. We provided, you know, as long as we weren't violating any rules or regulations or any laws, we were a great source to the surrounding agencies and the SROs. And then eventually the SROs got computer access, and video access, so they didn't have to lean on us as much. We still had a lot of workload, but they didn't have to lean on us as much. Great place to work. Just make sure your pension, I've said it in 3 or 4 of the videos already, just make sure you have a pension, because the workers' rights, the civil rights is not the right term, but the workers' rights and there's another word that goes with that you had because you were a union member and you were protected by whatever city clause giving you rights before they can terminate you or accuse you of things. You didn't have that down here, not so much. Down here, the supervisor can make or break you. And like I said, in my case, I had workman's comp cases, and I was still, let go. I wasn't fired. I was let go, so that I was allowed to continue working in a different field. They just weren't going to certify me in law enforcement because I couldn't do the training because I needed a new knee. And I was afraid that the wobbling of my leg doing an obstacle course or anything similar would, further damage my hips, my other knee, whatever, my back. And I didn't want to be wobbling for the rest of my life because I was trying to keep a job. I was happy with the job. I would have loved it if they kept me. But I had enough time to retire. I finished school. I started my master's after retirement, and I did finish it, I think, in record time, because now, is I was able to give it 100% as opposed to doing it, in between work and overtime assignments and whatever, sheriff's duty. But the point is, great place to work. I know they're offering incentives and bonuses to come down. But realistically, that bonus is not extra money. That bonus is you're gonna need it for your health insurance. You're gonna need it for they're pricing the heck out of our homes here. They're making you feel, let's say you buy a $300,000-$400,000 home. I'm not gonna talk to the rich guys because that's your business. But average guy, you sell your house in New York, you sell your condo, or you saved up. You come down here, you purchase a home. What the cities are doing is that they're pricing the home, and after a couple of years, your home value goes up in, administratively. I guess that's the word I'm trying to say. You still owe your mortgage, you're still making your payments, you're still working, but for some reason your home value has gone up, so they get to tax you more. It was on the news. This is December, I think today's maybe the 13th or 14th, whatever. 67 degrees in Florida, which is considered cool. 67 is considered cool. I know, don't start laughing. Because it is December. Another reason I love it down here. But yeah, they raised the value of your home. So after you own your home for a couple of years, they want to tell you your $300 or $400 home is now worth $500 to make up a number. I'm making up numbers here, but you get the point. They overvalue your homes so that they can tax you more. Meanwhile, you're still working and you're still paying off the mortgage. You're still, struggling. Maybe struggling is not the right word, but you're still hustling. You're still, making ends meet. Like I said, if you have your pension, it's a lot easier. But you're still making ends meet. You're still hustling, and then you don't realize it. And then all of a sudden, I'm here 23 years, by the way. That's why I put 1982 as my username, because I can't talk to you about today in New York, and I cannot talk to you about today in St. Lucie County law enforcement. I can talk to you about my experiences in the 80s and 90s in New York, and I can talk to you about living, situation now. And I'll have more information in my next video, part 3. Right now, this is the end of part 2. Thank you for getting this far in the video. I may have explained in previous videos. I go from talking about Port St. Lucie to talking about being a New York retiree to talking about working in law enforcement. I haven't even started talking too much. I think I might have done a short video on my trip to the West Palm VA to get VA services. So I'll highlight that in other videos. But you can see where my communication is and what my profile is and what my plan is to, give you a couple of different areas. Because I know law enforcement are more than law enforcement. Some of them are college graduates. Some of them are veterans. Some of them are, worked up north. Some of them are working in the South. And maybe I'm pointing out things that they realize also they would have wished they would have known. In my case, I would have loved to have somebody like me with the information like me back 20-something years ago. Like I told you early in the video, just law enforcement, trying to get a job with law enforcement in federal law enforcement, in my experience. And I could do another video on that. But for now, thanks for getting this far. I'm Juan in PSL, and thank you, like and subscribe.